The Mali Empire stands as one of the most magnificent expressions of African political genius, economic sophistication, and cultural achievement in human history. Yet the true depth of its greatness has been systematically obscured by centuries of European historical distortion and deliberate omission. To understand the authentic Mali, not the diminished version presented in Western textbooks, we must turn to the eyewitness accounts of medieval travelers who witnessed its splendor firsthand, and to the analytical framework provided by our greatest African scholars. As Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop demonstrated in his seminal work, Pre-Colonial Black Africa, the Mali Empire represented the culmination of indigenous African political and social development, a civilization that achieved levels of organization, wealth, and cultural sophistication that surpassed contemporary European kingdoms. Dr. Benyochanan and John Henrik Clarke, following in this tradition of rigorous African scholarship, emphasized that Mali was not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a continuous tradition of African excellence that stretched back to the Nile Valley civilizations. The medieval Arabic sources, particularly the accounts of Ibn Battuta, 13th century to 14th century, Al-Umari, 13th century to 14th century, and other contemporary observers, provide us with unfiltered glimpses into a civilization that controlled the gold trade of West Africa, maintained sophisticated systems of governance, and created urban centers that rivaled anything in the medieval world. These sources, when properly analyzed through an African-centered lens, reveal stories of technological innovation, administrative brilliance, and cultural achievement that have been deliberately suppressed in mainstream historical narratives. This examination will draw primarily from these contemporary accounts, supplemented by the analytical insights of African scholars, who have worked to restore the true history of our continent. We will explore not merely the well-known stories of Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, but the deeper structural achievements of Mali, its legal systems, its educational institutions, its technological innovations, and its role as a center of learning that attracted scholars from across the Islamic world. The conventional telling of Mali's origins focuses narrowly on the Mandinka people and the legendary figure of Sundiata Keita. While this narrative contains important truths, it obscures the deeper reality that Mali emerged from a sophisticated matrix of African civilizations that had been developing complex political and economic systems for centuries, before the empire's formal establishment in the 13th century. Cheikh Anta Diop's analysis in Pre-Colonial Black Africa reveals that Mali's political structures were rooted in ancient African traditions of governance that can be traced back to the Nile Valley. The empire's sophisticated administrative system, its methods of taxation, and its integration of diverse ethnic groups reflected organizational principles that had been refined over millennia of African political development. The Arabic sources provide crucial evidence for this deeper historical continuity. Al-Umari, writing in the 14th century, describes Mali not as a recent creation, but as an empire built upon ancient foundations and long-established customs. His account suggests that the political and economic systems he observed had deep historical roots, contradicting the European narrative that portrays African civilizations as recent or ephemeral phenomena. Ibn Battuta's observations, recorded during his visit to Mali in 1352 to 1353, reveal a society with highly developed legal traditions and administrative procedures that clearly predated the empire's supposed founding. He describes court protocols, legal procedures, and governmental structures that exhibited the kind of sophistication that develops only over extended periods of political evolution. The empire's territorial organization also reflected this deeper historical foundation. Mali controlled not just the gold-producing regions of Bambouk and Bouré, but also the salt mines of Tahaza and the trading centers along the Niger River. This level of economic integration required administrative capabilities and geographical knowledge that had been accumulated over generations of African political development. Archaeological evidence supports this interpretation. Excavations at sites like Djenadjeno reveal urban settlements with sophisticated craft production, long-distance trade networks, and complex social organization dating back to the 3rd century BCE. These findings demonstrate that the Mali Empire emerged from a landscape already rich with African urban civilization and technological achievement. The linguistic evidence further supports Diop's analysis. The administrative terminology used in Mali, as recorded by Arabic sources, shows clear connections to ancient African political vocabularies that can be traced across the continent. This linguistic continuity suggests that Mali's governmental systems were not innovations, but refinements of political traditions with deep African roots. The wealth of Mali that so astonished medieval observers was not simply the result of fortunate geography, as European historians often suggest, but the product of sophisticated African innovations in mining, metallurgy, and trade organization. The empire's control over gold production represented the culmination of centuries of African technological development in extractive industries. Al-Umari provides detailed descriptions of Mali's gold mining operations that reveal levels of technical sophistication rarely acknowledged in conventional histories. He describes mining techniques that involved complex shaft systems, water management, and ore processing methods that were far in advance of contemporary European practices. The empire's miners had developed specialized tools and techniques for extracting gold from both alluvial deposits and hard rock formations. The organization of gold production also demonstrated remarkable administrative sophistication. According to Al-Umari's account, the empire maintained strict control over gold mining through a system of royal monopolies and licensed operations that ensured both quality control and revenue collection. This system required detailed knowledge of geology, sophisticated record-keeping, and a complex bureaucracy capable of managing operations across vast distances. Ibn Battuta's observations of the salt trade reveal similar levels of organizational achievement. He describes the salt mines of Takhaza as a major industrial operation, involving hundreds of workers, sophisticated extraction techniques, and complex transportation networks. The empire's ability to coordinate salt production in the Sahara with gold mining in the south and to manage the trade routes connecting these operations represented a logistical achievement of extraordinary complexity. The monetary system of Mali also reflected African innovation. While European accounts often focus on the empire's use of gold, the Arabic sources reveal a sophisticated multi-commodity currency system that included salt bars, copper ingots, and cowrie shells alongside gold. This system allowed for trade across different economic zones and facilitated commerce on a scale that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. The empire's commercial law, as described by Ibn Battuta, included sophisticated provisions for contract enforcement, dispute resolution, and quality control that protected both merchants and consumers. These legal frameworks enabled long-distance trade on a scale that required high levels of trust and institutional reliability. The accounts of Mansa Musa's court, preserved in the writings of Al-Umari and other contemporary observers, provide unprecedented insights into the sophistication of African royal institutions and the cultural achievements of medieval Mali. These descriptions, when properly analyzed, reveal levels of ceremonial complexity, administrative organization, and cultural refinement that challenge every European stereotype about African civilization. Al-Umari's description of Mansa Musa's visit to Cairo in 1324 provides extraordinary detail about the emperor's entourage and the protocols of his court. The account describes a traveling party that included 60,000 people, including 12,000 personal servants, 500 herald slaves carrying gold staffs, and 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold. This level of organization required administrative capabilities of the highest order. The ceremonial aspects of Mansa Musa's court, as described by Al-Umari, reflected sophisticated traditions of royal protocol that had clearly been developed over extended periods. The emperor's refusal to prostrate himself before the Sultan of Egypt and his insistence on maintaining his own ceremonial dignity demonstrated a confidence in African royal traditions that was rooted in deep cultural foundations. Ibn Battuta's first-hand observations of the Mali court provide even more detailed insights into the daily operations of African royal government. He describes elaborate court ceremonies involving hundreds of participants, complex musical performances, and sophisticated protocols for receiving foreign dignitaries. These ceremonies were not mere displays of wealth, but functional aspects of governmental administration that served to reinforce political authority and cultural identity. The court's judicial functions, as observed by Ibn Battuta, revealed sophisticated legal traditions that combined Islamic law with indigenous African legal principles. He describes court sessions where complex commercial disputes were resolved through procedures that demonstrated deep understanding of both local customs and international commercial law. This legal synthesis represented a remarkable achievement in cross-cultural jurisprudence. The emperor's personal conduct, as recorded by these observers, reflected educational and cultural achievements that contradicted European assumptions about African rulers. Al-Umari notes that Mansa Musa was fluent in Arabic, but chose to use interpreters in formal settings as a matter of protocol rather than necessity. This linguistic sophistication was typical of Mali's educated elite, who were often multilingual and well-versed in both African and Islamic intellectual traditions. The court's administrative structure, as revealed in these accounts, included specialized departments for taxation, military affairs, trade regulation, and diplomatic relations. Ibn Battuta describes meeting officials responsible for specific aspects of imperial administration, each with clearly defined roles and sophisticated understanding of their responsibilities. This level of bureaucratic specialization was characteristic of highly developed state systems. The cultural life of the court also demonstrated remarkable sophistication. Both Al-Umari and Ibn Battuta describe elaborate musical performances, poetic recitations, and historical narratives that preserved and transmitted Mali's cultural heritage. These cultural activities were not mere entertainment, but essential elements of the empire's educational and ideological systems. The urban centers of the Mali Empire represented some of the most sophisticated examples of African city planning and architectural achievement in the medieval world. The accounts of travelers who visited these cities provide detailed evidence of urban sophistication that challenges conventional narratives about African civilization. Timbuktu, as described by various Arabic sources, was far more than a trading post. It was a major intellectual center with a university that attracted scholars from across the Islamic world. The city's libraries contained hundreds of thousands of manuscripts covering subjects ranging from astronomy and mathematics to law and literature. This intellectual infrastructure represented centuries of accumulated African scholarship and learning. The architectural achievements of Timbuktu, as described by medieval observers, included sophisticated building techniques adapted to the local environment. The famous Sankore University complex, with its distinctive architectural style, represented innovations in construction that were specifically African in origin. These buildings demonstrated mastery of engineering principles and aesthetic sensibilities that were uniquely suited to the Sahel environment. Gao, the eastern capital of the empire, was described by Ibn Battuta as a major commercial and administrative center with sophisticated urban planning. He describes wide boulevards, organized market districts, and residential areas that demonstrated careful attention to urban design. The city's location at the bend of the Niger River required sophisticated engineering to manage seasonal flooding and maintain year-round accessibility. Walata, the northern gateway to the empire, impressed Ibn Battuta with its cosmopolitan character and commercial sophistication. He describes a city where merchants from across Africa and the Middle East conducted business using complex commercial instruments and sophisticated accounting methods. The city's role as a customs and administrative center required high levels of bureaucratic organization and record keeping. The smaller cities and towns of Mali also demonstrated remarkable urban achievement. Arabic sources describe numerous settlements with specialized economic functions, sophisticated craft production, and complex social organization. These urban centers were connected by well-maintained roads and communication systems that enabled efficient administration across vast distances. The empire's urban planning principles, as revealed in these accounts, reflected sophisticated understanding of environmental management, economic organization, and social needs. Cities were typically located to take advantage of natural transportation routes while maintaining defensive positions and access to water resources. This level of strategic planning required detailed geographical knowledge and long-term thinking about urban development. The social organization of Mali's cities also demonstrated remarkable sophistication. Ibn Battuta describes complex systems of neighborhood organization, craft guilds, and commercial associations that managed urban life and economic activity. These institutions provided social services, maintained public order, and facilitated economic development in ways that would not be matched in European cities for centuries. The educational achievements of the Mali Empire centered particularly in Timbuktu, but extending throughout the empire's urban centers, represented one of the highest expressions of African intellectual culture in the medieval world. The manuscript collections and educational institutions of Mali preserved and advanced knowledge in ways that fundamentally challenge European narratives about African intellectual capacity. The University of Sankora in Timbuktu, as described in various Arabic sources, was one of the world's premier institutions of higher learning during the 14th and 15th centuries. The university attracted students and scholars from across Africa and the Islamic world, creating an intellectual environment that fostered original research and scholarly exchange. The institution's reputation extended as far as Cairo and Baghdad, where Mali's scholars were recognized for their contributions to Islamic jurisprudence, astronomy, and mathematics. The manuscript collections of Timbuktu, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, represented centuries of African intellectual achievement. These manuscripts covered an extraordinary range of subjects, including original works by African scholars on astronomy, mathematics, medicine, law, history, and literature. The preservation and copying of these manuscripts required sophisticated institutional support and demonstrated the empire's commitment to intellectual development. The educational curriculum in Mali's schools, as revealed in surviving manuscripts, included advanced studies in mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy that were based on both Islamic sources and indigenous African knowledge traditions. This synthesis of knowledge systems represented a remarkable intellectual achievement that produced scholars capable of original contributions to multiple fields of study. The empire's scholars made significant original contributions to various fields of knowledge. African astronomers in Timbuktu produced astronomical tables and calculations that were used throughout the Islamic world. Mali's mathematicians developed computational techniques and geometric principles that advanced the state of mathematical knowledge. The empire's legal scholars produced influential works on Islamic jurisprudence that incorporated African legal traditions and addressed the specific needs of African societies. The institutional support for education in Mali was extraordinary by medieval standards. The empire maintained schools in numerous cities, supported scholars through stipends and grants, and invested heavily in the production and preservation of manuscripts. This level of institutional commitment to education reflected a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between knowledge and political power. The empire's educational system also served important social and political functions. Education was a pathway to social mobility and political advancement, creating a meritocratic element within Mali's social structure. The empire's educated elite played crucial roles in administration, diplomacy, and commercial management, demonstrating the practical value of the educational investment. The international character of Mali's educational institutions also facilitated diplomatic and commercial relations. Scholars who had studied in Timbuktu served as ambassadors and commercial agents throughout the Islamic world, creating networks of trust and communication that supported the empire's international relations. The military achievements of the Mali Empire, as described in contemporary sources, reveal sophisticated innovations in military organization, tactics, and technology that enabled the empire to maintain control over vast territories and defend against external threats. These military innovations represented distinctly African approaches to warfare that were adapted to the specific geographical and political conditions of West Africa. Ibn Battuta's descriptions of Mali's military forces reveal a complex organizational structure that combined professional standing armies with local militias and specialized units. The empire's cavalry forces, mounted on horses imported from North Africa, were organized into units with specific tactical roles and equipped with sophisticated weaponry, including swords, spears, and composite bows. The empire's infantry forces demonstrated remarkable tactical sophistication. Arabic sources describe formations and maneuvers that required extensive training and coordination. The use of specialized weapons, including throwing spears and battle axes, reflected indigenous African military traditions that had been refined over centuries of warfare. Mali's military engineering capabilities were particularly impressive. The empire constructed and maintained fortifications throughout its territory, including sophisticated defensive works that incorporated both traditional African architectural techniques and innovations adapted from Islamic military engineering. These fortifications required advanced knowledge of engineering principles and demonstrated the empire's ability to mobilize large-scale construction projects. The empire's logistics capabilities enabled military operations across vast distances in challenging terrain. Arabic sources describe military campaigns that required coordination of supply lines, communication systems, and transportation networks across thousands of miles. This logistical sophistication was essential to maintaining control over an empire that stretched from the Atlantic coast to the bend of the Niger River. Mali's naval capabilities, though less well documented, were crucial to controlling the Niger River system. Ibn Battuta describes river fleets that patrolled the Niger and its tributaries, maintaining security for commercial traffic and projecting imperial power throughout the river system. These naval forces required specialized vessels, trained crews, and sophisticated coordination with land-based military units. The empire's intelligence and communication systems enabled rapid response to military threats and efficient coordination of defensive measures. Arabic sources describe messenger systems and intelligence networks that provided the imperial government with detailed information about conditions throughout the empire. This intelligence capability was essential to maintaining political control and military security across such vast territories. The integration of military and civilian administration in Mali represented a sophisticated approach to governance that maximized both security and economic development. Military commanders often served as provincial governors, ensuring coordination between military and civilian authorities. This integration enabled efficient resource mobilization and rapid response to both military and administrative challenges. The legal system of the Mali Empire, as observed and recorded by Ibn Battuta and other contemporary sources, represented a remarkable synthesis of Islamic jurisprudence and indigenous African legal traditions that created a sophisticated framework for governance and dispute resolution. This legal synthesis demonstrated the empire's ability to integrate diverse cultural traditions while maintaining social order and promoting economic development. Ibn Battuta's detailed observations of Mali's court proceedings reveal a legal system that combined formal Islamic law with traditional African methods of dispute resolution. He describes court sessions where judges applied Islamic legal principles while also considering local customs and traditional African concepts of justice. This legal pluralism enabled the empire to govern diverse populations while maintaining cultural authenticity. The empire's commercial law was particularly sophisticated, reflecting the needs of a society heavily dependent on long-distance trade. Arabic sources describe detailed regulations governing commercial transactions, contract enforcement, and dispute resolution that protected both local merchants and foreign traders. These commercial laws included provisions for quality control, standardized weights and measures, and procedures for resolving disputes between parties from different cultural backgrounds. Mali's criminal law system, as described by Ibn Battuta, included sophisticated procedures for investigation, trial, and punishment that balanced the demands of justice with the need for social stability. The The empire's judges were trained in both Islamic law and traditional African legal principles, enabling them to apply appropriate legal frameworks to different types of cases and different categories of people. The empire's administrative law governed the relationship between the imperial government and local communities, establishing clear procedures for taxation, military service, and other governmental obligations. This administrative framework enabled the empire to maintain central control while respecting local autonomy and traditional governance structures. The legal education system in Mali produced judges and legal scholars who were recognized throughout the Islamic world for their expertise in jurisprudence. The empire's legal schools, particularly those in Timbuktu, attracted students from across Africa and the Middle East. This legal education system ensured continuity in legal traditions and maintained high standards of legal scholarship. The empire's legal system also included sophisticated procedures for international law and diplomatic relations. Arabic sources describe detailed protocols for treaty negotiation, diplomatic immunity, and the resolution of disputes between different political entities. These international legal capabilities enabled Mali to maintain complex relationships with neighboring states and distant trading partners. The integration of women into Mali's legal system was particularly notable by medieval standards. Ibn Battuta describes women serving as judges and legal advisors, and notes that women's property rights were protected by both Islamic and traditional African law. This legal equality reflected broader patterns of gender relations in African societies that contrasted sharply with contemporary practices in Europe and the Middle East. The economic achievements of the Mali Empire extended far beyond the simple extraction and export of gold that dominates conventional historical narratives. Contemporary sources reveal a sophisticated economic system that included advanced financial instruments, complex trade networks, and innovative approaches to economic management that enabled the empire to maintain prosperity across vast territories and diverse populations. Al-Umari's account of Mali's economic organization reveals a complex system of taxation and revenue collection that supported both imperial administration and local development. The empire's tax system included levies on trade, agricultural production, and mining operations, but also incorporated traditional African concepts of reciprocal obligation between rulers and subjects that ensured that taxation supported community welfare, as well as imperial needs. The empire's monetary system was far more sophisticated than conventional accounts suggest. While gold was certainly important, Arabic sources describe a multi-commodity currency system that included salt bars, copper ingots, iron tools, and cowrie shells. This diverse monetary system enabled trade across different economic zones and facilitated commerce between communities with different resource bases and economic needs. Mali's banking and credit systems, as described by Ibn Battuta and other observers, included sophisticated financial instruments that enabled long-distance trade and investment. The empire's merchants used letters of credit, partnership agreements, and insurance contracts that were recognized throughout the trans-Saharan trade network. These financial innovations reduced the risks of long-distance commerce and enabled the accumulation of capital for large-scale economic projects. The empire's trade networks extended far beyond the famous trans-Saharan routes. Arabic sources describe commercial relationships that reached the Atlantic coast, the forest regions of the south, and the Nile Valley to the east. This extensive trade network required sophisticated coordination and management that demonstrated remarkable organizational capabilities. Mali's agricultural system supported both subsistence needs and commercial production. Contemporary sources describe sophisticated irrigation systems, crop rotation techniques, and livestock management practices that maximized agricultural productivity. The empire's ability to maintain agricultural surpluses while supporting large urban populations represented a significant achievement in agricultural management. The empire's craft production was highly developed and included sophisticated techniques in metallurgy, textile production, and other specialized industries. Arabic sources describe craft guilds and specialized production centers that produced goods for both local consumption and export. This craft production required advanced technical knowledge and sophisticated organizational structures. The integration of different economic zones within the empire represented a remarkable achievement in economic coordination. The empire successfully linked the gold-producing regions of the south with the salt-producing areas of the north, while also integrating agricultural regions, craft production centers, and commercial hubs. This economic integration required sophisticated transportation systems, communication networks, and administrative coordination. The contemporary sources examined in this analysis provide the foundation for a more accurate understanding of African civilization that recognizes the Mali Empire as one expression of a continuous tradition of African excellence. This tradition extends back to the Nile Valley civilizations and forward to the present day, demonstrating the fundamental continuity of African achievement across time and space. The lessons of Mali's success remain relevant to contemporary African development. The empire's synthesis of traditional African institutions with Islamic influences, its sophisticated approach to economic development, and its commitment to education and cultural preservation provide models for contemporary African societies seeking to achieve development while maintaining cultural authenticity. The restoration of Mali's true history also has implications for global understanding of medieval civilization. The empire's achievements in governance, education, and economic organization were equal to or superior to contemporary developments in Europe and other regions. Recognition of these achievements requires a fundamental revision of conventional narratives about medieval world history and the relationship between different civilizations. As we continue to recover and analyze the historical sources that document African achievement, we must remember that this work serves not only academic purposes, but also the broader project of African liberation and self-determination. The true history of the Mali Empire, like the broader history of African civilization, provides the foundation for African pride, African unity, and African progress in the contemporary world. The medieval travelers who witnessed Mali's greatness could not have imagined that their testimonies would one day serve as weapons in the struggle against historical distortion and cultural imperialism. Yet their careful observations and detailed accounts now provide us with the evidence we need to reclaim our history and restore our rightful place in the human story. The Mali Empire stands as eternal testimony to the genius of African civilization and the enduring capacity of African peoples to create societies of extraordinary beauty, sophistication, and achievement.